Hi, I'm James Medows. I'm a traffic lawyer. Today we're going to be discussing different types of moving violations. Under Vehicle and Traffic Law, Section 1111D, a red light ticket carries 3 points. And you're going to say, I went through the red light. How am I going to be able to defend myself? In New York City, there's no plea bargaining. So it has nothing to do with whether you did it or not. It has to do with whether the officer knows how to legally articulate all the facts in conjunction with the law to the standards of the judge that will be randomly assigned to your case. The elements that the officer has to establish is not only did the light actually work properly, but the officer has to establish where the stopping point was before your vehicle went through the red light. If the officer just said that you went through a red light, you're not going to be found guilty. The officer has to establish that while the light was red, you passed over the stopping point, and the officer has to state how far in proximity to that stopping point you were when you went past that red light. And now we're going to talk about cell phones. If you get caught driving holding a cell phone, that carries 5 points. If you get 3 cell phone tickets in 2 years, your license is going to be suspended. What the officer has to establish for you to be found guilty of a cell phone ticket, you were holding a phone in a particular hand which was in close proximity to a particular ear with no legitimate purpose. Common defenses would be if there was an emergency. So for instance, let's say you're a doctor and you're on the phone speaking to the hospital, the officer pulls you over and the officer decides to write you a ticket. If you go to court and you have some type of documentation from the hospital stating that you were using the phone for a legitimate reason, if you have the right lawyer, you may be able to get yourself out of this ticket. If you get a ticket for following too closely or tailgating, this ticket carries 4 points. People ask me, what should I do when I get pulled over by the police? And the first thing I say is, before that officer comes over, show your hands and know where your license and registration are, but do not grab for it because the officer will think that you're grabbing for a gun. What you should do is when the officer comes over to you, wait for the officer to talk. Do not admit any guilt. When the officer says license and registration, you ask permission, officer, can I go to my glove compartment to get the registration? Show your registration and your license. I wouldn't ignore it. And I say that because you are responsible to answer that ticket. There are times where the ticket won't show up. So for instance, let's just say you are an out-of-state driver. The Department of Motor Vehicles has to manually enter your information into their computers and things get lost. What I would suggest you do is not ignore the ticket. I would suggest that you contact the Department of Motor Vehicles and find out the status. Why? Because if you ignore this, your license can be suspended. The process, once you retain my services, I always tell my clients, you set it and forget it. I'm responsible for your case. I'm going to be entering a plea of not guilty, and I'm going to try to delay your ticket as long as I can in New York City. If it's outside of New York City, I'm looking at handling it much differently and trying to put it on the court's calendar as soon as possible.